Hi, and welcome back to my channel. I am Shinigami Eyes, and today I'm going to be summarizing everything that happened in the FNAF Silver Eyes Trilogy. This isn't going to be a book review, but rather is just going to chronologically lay out everything that happens in these books. The first book in this trilogy is the series namesake, The Silver Eyes. It has a corresponding graphic novel that summarizes the same story in a shorter format. The story begins with a quick-paced scene of the end of Book 1. Our protagonist, Charlie, being hunted down by an animatronic, who we can assume to be Foxy. She was wedged behind a row of arcade games, cramped in the crawl space between the consoles and the wall, tangled electrical cords and useless plugs strewn beneath her. She was cornered, the only way out was past the thing. After this quick cutscene, we're thrown into the present day. Charlie is visiting her hometown in Utah that she hasn't been to for 10 years, since she was 7 years old at the time her friend Michael died. In Utah, Charlie decides to go back and visit her family home, left untouched and frozen in time. This brings memories of her father, who we begin to learn and understand more about. Charlie was taken by her aunt away from this house and presumably her father 10 years ago. Exploring her old bedroom, she finds her father's old inventions, the animatronics he had made for her, a bunny called Theodore, a unicorn called Stanley, and a doll called Ella. Ella being an animatronic little girl, standing ready in the closet, holding a teacup, waiting to be summoned by a turning wheel on the floor to walk out of the closet and back in. Charlie reminisces on her childhood, watching her father making the animatronics and seeing a very unsettling looking endoskeleton. In a darkened corner behind her father, barely visible, hung a jumble of metal limbs, a twisted skeleton with burning silver eyes. Every once in a while, it gave an uncanny twitch. When Charlie goes to her car to leave, she is missing her keys and has to go back inside. There is something creepy and unsettling about this fact, which is portrayed through Charlie's anxiousness to get out and her nervousness rushing. As she goes to leave, she trips over, triggering Ella to start and look down at Charlie on the floor. This chapter does a really good job at developing the creepy and eerie atmosphere of the book before any action happens and throughout setting the scene, context, and backstory. Charlie rushes out of her old home and heads to a restaurant to meet her old friends. We are introduced to these friends, the characters in the story: Jessica, Carlton, and John, who is told to be Charlie's childhood crush. Charlie will be staying with Jessica in a motel, while the boys will be staying with Carlton, who still lives in Utah. More about the disappearance of Michael is revealed, that his body was never found. The group discusses that the following day they will attend a scholarship ceremony that is being held by Michael's parents, dedicated in his name. The topic of Freddy's comes up, this being uncomfortable and upsetting to Charlie, who leaves the restaurant. Carlton reveals that Freddy's has been under construction for years and that the building can't be seen, so it's uncertain as to whether it's still there or not. As the group gather and talk about Freddy's outside the restaurant, we gather more context. Charlie's father was the owner of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, and they all spent lots of time there together as kids. Here the main animatronics from the game are introduced and discussed: Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy. Charlie has a strange memory where she thinks Freddy had yellow fur rather than brown. She contemplates about this memory of a yellow-furred animatronic. There was something disturbing, worrisome about that lapse in memory. It was 10 years ago, it's not like you've got dementia at 17, she told herself, but it was such a basic detail to have misremembered. Out of the corner of her eye, she caught John looking at her, a pensive expression on his face, as though she had said something important. This chapter ends with the group deciding they're going to venture out to Freddy's. The group arrive at Freddy's and realise it has been torn down, a new large building built and then left empty and unused for years, to Charlie's disappointment. The group still decide to venture inside, revealing the building as an empty mall with a food court and empty rooms that would have been shops. They see a light in the distance, to which Charlie wonders about the purpose of a night guard here. Jessica notices that there is a space with no entry, the walls jutting out on the outside but being closer in on the inside, leading them to wonder if Freddy's could be hidden within. They hide successfully from the night guard, and as they hide between the walls, they discover that the wall they're against is a wall that they remember from Freddy's. The building has indeed not been knocked down, but built around. They successfully get into Freddy's and are surprised at how it seems paused in time. The tables were still in place, covered in their silver and white checkered cloths. The chairs were pulled up to them haphazardly, some tables with too many and others with too few. It looked as though the room had been abandoned in the middle of the lunch hour. In Freddy's, they spot the three main animatronics on the stage. Bonnie, Chica, and Freddy are described in great detail as to look exactly like in the first FNAF game. The kids look around Freddy's, which seems to also be described in the same layout as the first game. Charlie goes to look into her father's office, but it is locked and she can't get in. Eventually, the group head to Pirate's Cove to see Foxy when a strange air of fear hovers amongst the group. John hears the sound of a music box coming from the stage, but none of the others hear it and brush it off. But when they hear a loud crashing clanging sound, which just turns out to be Carlton looking for food in the kitchen, they still choose to run out and leave at this point, worried that the noise probably alerted the security guard. Charlie awakes in her motel room with Jessica, and we are introduced to some more characters in the group. Marla, her little brother Jason, and Lamar, which is an anagram for Marla, interestingly enough. They go back to eat at the diner and end up talking about Freddy's, where they decide they'll break back in tonight. They also allude to Michael's disappearance being related to Freddy's. The group head out to the ceremony at their old school, a sort of memorial as well as a scholarship in the name of Michael. It is a deeply emotional ceremony led by Michael's parents, and in this we discover he wasn't the only missing child. There were 4 more, the 5 missing children in the FNAF story. Michael's parents, Carlton, and Michael's grandparents make speeches that are deeply emotional and moving and really show the impact of this missing child. Charlie eventually has to leave, too emotional to stay, and heads back to her old house. Noticing that John is walking behind her, she allows him to come along. In her father's workshop, Charlie has another flashback. She remembers her father showing her the first designs of Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica as he built them. 2 long beams protruded from the top of the head of one of the hulking masses. The head itself was solid and skull-like. The beams looked as if they had been violently thrust there. John reveals what he saw on the night of Michael's disappearance. He saw a different bear mascot in Freddy's. The animatronics had started glitching and acting strangely, and when he looked back, both Michael and the bear were gone. The group of friends venture back out to Freddy's to explore, sneaking back in and successfully hiding from the night guard. When they're in Freddy's, they discover a door that they hadn't noticed before that leads to the security room, presumably the room that you play in the game. In the security room, they discover the power is still on, the lights still working, and the security cameras too. When playing around with the buttons, they realize that some make the animatronics move. Marla hears the sound of the music box. The group can't find the controls for Freddy, and this, along with the cameras missing certain rooms, has them conclude that there must be another control room, which they start to search for. John comes to an uneasy Charlie and suggests they play hide and seek, which she is happy to do. Jason and Lamar are playing around with the buttons when they stop working. Lamar notices that Bonnie seems to be watching the camera. Jason runs off, bored, and explores the arcade. He looks at the drawings done by children, and one takes his interest in particular. A drawing of a child hugging Bonnie. However, as he looks up and looks back, the drawing now shows the child facing away from Bonnie. Meanwhile, Marla, Lamar, Carlton, and Jessica find the second security room in Pirate's Cove, showing most of the rooms in Freddy's. They play around with the buttons, turning on the lights and the speakers. As they fiddle with the sound knob, they can almost hear a voice, sounding a bit like singing. As Charlie and John play hide and seek, Charlie runs quickly and ducks behind a curtain. As her eyes adjust to the light, she realizes she is hiding behind the curtain with Foxy, causing her to absolutely freak out. We learn that the figure that she was afraid of in her dad's garage was Foxy. It was standing over her. It was the thing from her father's workshop. The misshapen thing that hung in the corner, shaken by random convulsions as its eyes burned silver. As she goes to run away, Foxy swipes at her with his hook, causing her arm to cut open and bleed. Marla apologizes, saying she must have accidentally pressed a button, and they all quickly leave, taking Charlie to the pharmacist to wrap up her injured arm. Charlie wakes up early the following morning, and as she leaves the motel room to go for a walk, John joins her. They go for a walk in the woods, and Charlie reveals that Freddy's was not her father's first restaurant. There had been one before it that she barely remembers as she was so young, vaguely remembering there being a bear and a rabbit. She also remembers spending most of her time in her young childhood with a little boy, gradually remembering and realizing that this was her twin brother. She describes her memories of this restaurant and the spring trap suits from the original diner, Spring Bonnie and Spring Freddy, how they were sometimes entirely mechanical and sometimes were worn as costumes. They loved the animals, the yellowish-brown bear and the matching rabbit, who wandered the restaurant, dancing and singing for the customers, and sometimes just for Charlie and the little boy. They sometimes move stiffly and mechanically, and sometimes with fluid human movement. Charlie decides she's determined to find the building of this original restaurant, and John is very excited at the idea, wanting to join her. As Charlie remembers a song her parents would sing on their trips from the old diner, she remembers the lyric, Harmony, which leads John to thinking of the location New Harmony. They drive out there together, hopeful that they'll find the mysterious original restaurant. At first, Charlie doesn't recognise anything, but eventually she recognises a road and train tracks, soon finding the location. John uncovers a sign buried under the grass that says Fredbear's Family Diner. As they explore the building of Fredbear's, they explore the dining room, the kitchen, and then Charlie finds a closet which brings back many memories. The memory of the suits hanging in it, and then the memory of her brother being taken. There was a figure in the door. It looked like one of the costumes was standing on its own, but it was motionless, so still that Charlie wasn't sure what she was seeing. It was the rabbit, the yellowish-brown rabbit that they loved, but it did not dance or sing. Just stood there and stared at them, unblinking. They began to squirm under its gaze, and little boy screwed up his face to wail. Charlie pinched his arm, seized with an instinctual sense that they must not cry. The rabbit looked back and forth from one to the other with those all-too-human eyes, ponderous, as though weighing and measuring them in some way that Charlie could not understand. Charlie just tells John about her memory of the yellow rabbit and not the memory of her brother being stolen, who she now remembers to be called Sammy. John reveals that the bear he saw the day Michael disappeared was also yellow. As they head out of the restaurant and back to the motel, Charlie grabs a piece of metal she finds on the ground, a spring lock. Charlie and John head back to the motel, and shortly after, they meet the rest of the group at the diner for dinner. They all head back to Freddy's, and when they arrive at the mall, the security guard is blocking the entry to Freddy's, telling them that he'd seen them the previous night and could have them arrested. There was something almost immediately off-putting about the man. He was tall and slightly too thin for his uniform, which bagged at the shoulders and waist, as if he had once been a more robust man, but he had lost his form somehow to illness or tragedy. His name tag reading Dave hung askew on his chest. His skin was sallow and his eyes were undercut by heavy lines, adding to the impression of long-standing ill health. Charlie convinces the guard to allow them to go in if he joins them, to which he agrees, also being curious about Freddy's, and they all venture in together. As Dave walks past, Charlie notices deep scars on both sides of his neck that look too perfectly and deliberately shaped. The group jump into the control room and Dave immediately knows how to program the animatronics, causing them to start dancing. He claims, however, that this is just beginner's luck. Meanwhile, Jason is exploring the drawings in the arcade and the dining hall, finding ones that move again, placed in a sequence so as to tell a story. When the first stopped moving, another started. They continued one after the other until the last, the one he had just put back, was finished. Jason watched, eyes wide, his heart pounding, but by the time he realized what was happening, it was over. The figures were fixed in a place, and now they did tell a story. In the first, a child was sitting alone. In the second, Bonnie appeared behind the child. In the next, Bonnie had snatched the child, lifting it off the ground. In the last, the child was screaming. His eyes white and his heart racing, Jason stepped back. He was transfixed. His body suddenly felt leaden, too heavy to run. A sound arose, like wind rustling the pages on the wall, though they hung motionless before him. Jason heads back, and they all watch as Dave programs a special dance with the animatronics for them all. It starts off with Bonnie dancing around them and playing the guitar, but he speeds up and ends up attacking them, unable to be turned off with the buttons. All of the animatronics now start rapidly moving as the lights flicker and change colours and the speakers blare both static and a jumbled growling voice. Charlie stood fixed in place, unable to take her eyes off the animals. They're trying to get away, she thought. It was a child's thought, and she tried to dismiss it, but it clung as she watched them, scarcely noticing the fitful flickering of the lights and sound. The animatronic creatures didn't look like they were glitching. Their movements seemed not mechanical, but hysterical, like there was something they needed desperately to do, but horribly could not. The group noticed that Dave has gone missing in the chaos, and they try to look for him, but meanwhile he is up to something else. Deep in the restaurant, he is unlocking a closet that holds a costume covered in yellow fur. Meanwhile, Jason sees a flash of a yellow rabbit running past. He slips away from the group, becoming determined to follow it. Jason moves around Freddy's, ending up at Pirate's Cove, where he bumps into Carlton, but just as they bump into one another, the yellow rabbit jumps out, attacking Carlton. He gets taken away while Jason watches in absolute horror. Foxy comes out trying to attack Jason, but John and Charlie come and rescue him, the group rushing out of Freddy's. Jason keeps saying that Bonnie took Carlton, to which no one believes him, but when they see that Carlton is missing, they realise that they have to get help. They also realise that nobody saw Dave again. The group, apart from a missing Carlton, head into the town to get help. They run over to a police officer who is very suspicious of them, but follows them to Freddy's. However, when they arrive, the entrance is chained up. Police officer at this point truly does not believe them, thinking they've made it up or just freaked themselves out. When they finally tell him who is missing, Carlton, the policeman changes his tune as Carlton's dad is a cop, leading to the officer to call Carlton's father Clay to the mall. Clay reassures them that Carlton is known for pulling pranks all the time, and that he must be tricking them. The group are unconvinced, but still agree to go back to Carlton's house with Clay, and they have hot chocolate. Clay talks about the pranks Carlton has pulled, like pretending he had a twin brother at school, and the group feel that this is very different, that it can't be a prank, although they're hopeful that it is. As they begin talking about Freddy's, Clay reveals that he was a detective on Michael's case, that he is certain of the man who was guilty, but that he still walks free, as there were never any bodies found. As they all go to bed, Charlie has a nightmare that flashes between her past and present self, bumping into Foxy, or the terrible twitching thing. It stood on its own, bent and twisted, with a narrow reddish canine face, and an almost human body. Its clothing was rags, its metal joints and limbs stark and exposed, but Charlie registered only its eyes, the silver eyes that flashed at her. Charlie goes out to get some air, and John follows her out there. When she keeps asking what people thought about her father, John admits that people thought that he was behind the murders, which leaves Charlie shocked and angry. At this, we also find out that her father ended his own life after the disappearances. Charlie asks John to come with her to her old house one last time. The following morning, the group are at Carlton's house. His mum hears what has happened and is furious that Clay hasn't gone and looked, and mentions the horror of Michael's disappearance at Freddy's. They send a police officer, Officer Dunn, to head to Freddy's to investigate. They find, interestingly enough, that the chains are now gone. As he looks around Freddy's, he hears a scattering noise, and going into the office and opening the cabinet, he's confronted by the yellow rabbit. Before he could turn, the costume pitched forward, landing on Dunn with the lifeless weight of a heavy corpse. The rabbit swings Dunn around, breaking his arm and choking him when he pulls out a knife, stabbing and killing him. The scene changes to Charlie and John entering Charlie's old home, walking in as Charlie looks for photos, memories and missing puzzle pieces as to what's going on. She sits in her old bedroom next to John, and they look at her old animatronics, Theodore, Ella and Stanley, as they look through an old photo album together. They see photos of Charlie and her twin brother, Sammy, photos of her parents, lovingly together, and all as a big happy family. As John reassures her that he doesn't think Charlie's father committed the murders, Charlie reveals that she isn't so certain. She reveals that when she came home to collect her things, she saw what remained of her father. It was one of his creatures, one she had never seen, and it was facing the stairs. Its head was bowed a little so that Charlie could see that the back of its skull was open, the circuits exposed. The limbs and joints lay bare, a skeleton of naked metal string with twisting wires of bloodless circulation, and its arms were outstretched in a lonesome simile of an embrace. It was standing in the middle of a dark, still pool of some liquid that seemed, though it must have been imperceptible, to be spreading. As John and Charlie look through papers in her father's room, they come across a picture that shows there was somebody else working on the restaurant. They see a photograph of Charlie's father in the yellow bear suit and somebody else next to him in a yellow rabbit costume. The two go to the library, where a librarian assists them in looking through the old news articles in microfilm form. They decide to look at 1982, this being the year Sammy went missing. Charlie slowly begins to remember more details of the night of his disappearance, remembering it was on Halloween. They quickly find an article about Sammy, toddler snatched. Charlie refuses to read but gets John to look for anything useful, to which he finds something very useful, a photo of the two co-owners, Charlie's father and another man next to him who John and Charlie both immediately recognize. Suddenly, Marla bursts in and says that Jason is missing, and she knows that he's gone to Freddy's. They all quickly come with her to try and find him. The next chapter starts from the perspective of Carlton, waking up in Freddy's feeling woozy and nauseous as he is trapped inside a mascot costume that is restraining and digging into him, leaving him in pain and unable to move. The yellow rabbit enters the room and takes off his head to reveal that he is Dave, the security guard. Dave continues warning Carlton not to move, explaining the type of suit he is in, a spring-lock suit, that will snap together and sever him with too much movement. Dave reveals that this suit was one of the first made by Charlie's father, now named for the first time, Henry. If you trigger those spring locks, two things will happen. First, all the locks will snap right into you, making deep cuts all over your body. And a split second later, all the animatronic parts they've been holding back, all that sharp steel and hard plastic, will instantly be driven onto your body. You will die, but it will be slow. You'll feel your organs punctured. The suit will grow wet with your blood, and you will know that you're dying for long minutes. You'll try to scream, but you will be unable to. Your vocal cords will be severed, and your lungs will fill with your own blood until you drown in it. Dave takes off the costume, revealing his body covered in scars from these springlock suits. Meanwhile, the group come into Freddy's to search for Jason and find that the door has now been entirely welded shut. They spot Jason's footprints leading away from the door, and finally that it leads to a vent, another way to enter Freddy's, but none of them can fit in. They conclude that there must be another way to get in, and realise that there has to be a crawl space between the roof of Freddy's and the roof of the mall, which they decide to search for. They find a ladder and move it along until they find a trapdoor, an entrance through the roof, which they climb through. The group squeeze through the crawl space until they find a skylight and they're able to lodge open and jump through. Charlie lands among mascot suits and animatronic spare parts, which leaves her frantic and nervous as if they were real. She looks at all of the ice surrounding them, gets tangled up in the endoskeleton, and is filled with immense fear. As they all hoist themselves down, they realise that they won't be able to get back out this way, and are uncertain on exactly how they will leave, but they continue on to find Jason. The group split up into two groups, going to the two control rooms to look around the restaurant on the cameras, using walkie-talkies to communicate. Lamar and Marla find Jason very quickly in the first control room, relieved. However, then they see the security guard on the cameras and warn Jessica, Charlie and John to hide in the other control room. The scene changes back to Carlton, who is still trapped in the springlock suit, trying very cautiously to not move too much. He slowly edges himself into the view of the security cameras, hearing voices. He knows it's a rescue and that the other children must be there. As he sits in front of the camera, he spots another suit, slumped over. Deep inside its eye sockets, he can see glowing eyes peering out. The bear begins to talk to him, being described as the voice that he would have known anywhere, that voice he would have given anything to hear again. Carlton becomes weakening as the bear, Michael, tells him what had happened to him. The two groups are sitting in the two control rooms when Marla and Lamar notice that Bonnie is missing from his spot on the stage. They quickly warn the others not to leave over the walkie-talkies, but the reception is jumbled, the lights flashing, the screen static. Charlie spots Carlton on the cameras and heads out of the security room, locking Jason and Jessica inside and heading to get Carlton. As she looks around, disoriented, she too notices that Bonnie is missing and is then confronted face to face with him. Bonnie stood only inches from her, his mouth opening and closing rapidly and his eyes rolling wildly in his head. Charlie jerked away, then backed up slowly. The rabbit did not try to follow, just continued his bizarre and silent incantation, his eyes aimlessly ricocheting in his head. A spotlight flashes on Charlie and she scrambles away, hiding in the bathroom. Meanwhile, John is trying to break open the deadbolt, and Jessica is desperately watching the screens, which are now mostly static but occasionally display images. Charlie is hiding in the bathroom when Bonnie comes in, on the attack, while Charlie is hiding inside a bathroom stall. The noise grew louder, the sound of fabric and fur stretching, tearing and popping. What is that? Charlie dug into the floor with her nails, holding down a guttural scream. He's bending over. A large paw touched down gently in front of her, then another shape, the creature's head. It was massive, filling the space under the door. Gracefully, Bonnie lowered himself to the floor and turned his head sideways until his eye met Charlie's. His giant mouth was open wide with a ghoulish excitement, as though he had found someone in a game of hide and seek. Bonnie manages to rip the cubicle wall off the hinges just as Charlie slips out under the stalls and runs out of the door. She runs to the security room, but John still can't get the door open, so she keeps on running, noticing Chica is now missing too. She shuts herself in a seemingly empty room where she finds Carlton and instantly realizes the position he is in, being stuck in a springlock suit. She helps him get out of it. Finally, after the cautious and tedious task of removing the suit, Charlie is able to break Carlton free. He then reveals what he'd found out, that the children were taken and brought here by Dave, and that they were still here, Michael being in the Golden Freddy costume. The scene changes back to John and Jessica. Marla warns them to stay still and quiet when a loud banging starts on the door. The doors begin to shake and are about to give in. They see an eye through the crack in the shaking door. Meanwhile, Foxy comes to attack Jason, Marla, and Lamar. He comes to the entrance of the control room, so they flick off the light and back up against the walls, hiding. Foxy seems to lock eyes with Marla but backs away and leaves, but as Jason closes the door, Foxy quickly comes back, opening the door and attacking, sinking his hook into Jason's leg and dragging him away. As Foxy continues on trying to come in and attack Marla and Lamar, they realise he can't fit in the door and manage to kick him away, closing the door. But Jason is now gone. Flipping back to Charlie and Carlton, they hear footsteps coming their way and Charlie hides behind the door holding a pipe. As Dave walks back in, Charlie manages to hit him over the head and knock him out as they run away, but they are very quickly confronted face to face with Chica. Carlton and Charlie manage to outrun Chica, and running past Jessica and Jason, who manage to break open the door, they all join together and hide in the other office, leaving the lights off and hiding inside. The group gather in the office while Carlton is dizzy and throwing up. Charlie concludes he must be concussed, and they know that they need to get out and go to the doctor. The group slowly sneak out, following Marla's instructions on the walkie-talkie as to when the coast is clear, to head towards the other office room and try to wake up and question Dave, the security guard, who is currently still passed out. They find cords to tie him up as Carlton notices that the Golden Freddy suit with Michael is missing. Jessica screams as in a pile of animatronic parts and suits, they find the dead body of Officer Dunn. Eventually they wake up Dave and try to question him as he blankly stares. Charlie notices that Dave is staring at the rabbit's head. As she places it on him, he begins to speak, telling Charlie that he helped her father create. The group angrily realise that this is the man who killed Michael, a communal rage filling the room as both John and Carlton hit him. He explains what he believes will happen. When it gets dark, they will awaken. The children's spirits will rise. They will kill you. I'll just walk out in the morning, stepping over your corpses one by one. He looked at each of them in turn, as if relishing in the bloody scene. They'll kill you too, Jessica said. No, I'm quite confident that I will survive. Really? John said suddenly. I'm pretty sure they're the spirits of the kids you killed. He all but spat. Why would they hurt us? It's you they're after. They don't remember, Dave said. They've forgotten. The dead do forget. All they know is that you are here, trying to take away their happiest day. You're intruders. He lowered his voice to a hush. You were grown-ups. Dave is of no help, and John leaves the other three in the room to try and gain a signal on the walkie-talkies, trying to find an escape. The scene changes to Carlton's father Clay, who is very worried at the police station. He looks through the old reports from the disappearance of Michael, searching for the name of the murderer. He had killed the children. Clay knew it. The whole department knew it. He had been present for each abduction, and he had mysteriously and briefly vanished at the same time as each child went missing. A search of his house had found a room crammed with boxes of mechanical parts and a musty yellow rabbit suit, as well as stacks of journals full of raving paranoia, passages about Henry that ranged from wild jealousy to near worship. But there had been no evidence, there had been no bodies, and so there could be no charge. As Claire looks at the photo of William Afton, it triggers a memory. He goes into the background check of local businesses and finds a photo that matches, a man registered as Dave Miller. As he looks through the photos, he realizes something unusual, that the photos of each animatronic show one shining eye peering out. Meanwhile, Jason wakes up in Pirate's Cove. Asleep on a pile of cords and wires, he tries to peer out to plan his escape, but is faced by Foxy. However, he seems to malfunction and turn off, not attacking him. Marla and Lamar exit the control room, shining their flashlight on Foxy. As he goes to lurch towards them, Jason manages to slip past him, running off with the other two, only for them to then be met with Freddy. The three run into the party room, hiding under a table each. Meanwhile, John is unsuccessfully trying to get the walkie-talkies to connect to the outside world. The three are hiding anxiously under the tables as Freddy walks in. He bends down to peer under Jason's table, but Jason is able to quickly duck away. The group manage to run out from under the two tables he looks underneath, nervously waiting under the third table, when to their surprise and relief, Freddy leaves. Of course, they relax so soon, as Freddy comes back in, ripping the table away to attack. Just in time, John and Charlie are able to whack him from behind, causing him to fall over and the group to get away. As they try to run to the office to barricade themselves in, they notice the door is locked and the lights are on. Dave has escaped. As they turn around to go back, they're confronted with Chica standing right in front of them. Chica bent forward and swung to the side, slamming John into the wall, and John let go, crumpling to the floor. The cupcake on Chica's platter snapped its mouth as if laughing, its eyes rolling in their tiny sockets. Charlie sees an exposed cord hanging overhead, and thinking quickly manages to pull it down and lodge it into Chica, causing an electrical surge. With a pleased smile, Dave watched the confrontation through the window in the office door. Just a matter of time now, he thought. The girl had been clever climbing the walls like that, but she had almost killed herself. They could not last much longer. All he had to do was wait. Suddenly, the room was lit with an ethereal blue. He froze, then slowly turned. Bonnie. The animatronic towered over him, close enough to touch. Dave fell back against the door and screamed. As the group run back away, Foxy is in the dining room waiting for them. Charlie distracts him and runs into the arcade, leading him there and hides between the machines, taking us to the cutscene that started the book. Movement in the room caught her eye and she saw a flash of silver light. He sees me. Charlie dropped to her hands and knees. She crawled backwards, scooching inch by inch. Her foot caught on a cable and she stopped to free it. Charlie hurls the arcade machine at Foxy, trapping him. As she goes to run away, he lodges his hook into her leg, tearing deep into it until she manages to rip her leg free with a serious wound. John runs in, stomping on Foxy's neck and pulling Charlie back out into the main party room, but the group are dismal. Every entry has been blocked by each animatronic and they're all slowly heading towards the group to attack. As they're accepting death, all of the animatronics stop in their tracks. They turn around and see the big yellow Freddy, Golden Freddy. The Golden Freddy speaks in murmurs and they all hear and realize that it's Michael. All of the kids realize that the animatronics are the missing kids, and they also at this time realize Foxy was trying to protect Jason and not hurt him. At this moment, Clay breaks through the sealed entrance door wielding a sledgehammer and runs to Carlton in embrace. The group go to head out when at the last minute, Charlie is grabbed by the neck by Dave. Resisting, she manages to trigger the spring locks, killing him in his spring lock suit. Charlie plunged her hands into the gap beneath the costume's head. Dave drew back, but she held on. "If you want to be one of them, then be one of them," she shouted, and she tripped the spring locks. Dave's eyes widened, and then he screamed. The group all head out, finally to safety. They all go back to Carlton's for their final night, and Clay promises to bring justice. The book ends with John and Charlie going on a last road trip before they head their separate ways, unsure if they'll meet again. Charlie goes to the graveyard to visit 2 graves, and the book ends with a memory of Charlie and her father having a nice, simple day. The second book in this trilogy is The Twisted Ones. It also has a corresponding second graphic novel. The story begins with Charlie, our series protagonist, in a robotics class, listening to a lecture. She reveals that she's going to see John that day, a year since she's last seen him, and since the previous book's occurrences. We also learn she's been having vivid nightmares about her lost twin brother Sammy. Charlie thinks about her and her Aunt Jen having their first argument, when Charlie decided she wanted to go back to Hurricane, to go back to the house, and to find answers. She headed to her old house after an explosive argument with her aunt, but decided on the way that she couldn't do it. She slept in the car for a week before going to stay with Jessica, who she ended up staying with for months. As she saw the option of a robotics course to enroll in, she did so eagerly. We're introduced to Charlie's new friend in class, Artie, who seems pretty jealous about Charlie meeting up with John, but tries to cover this up. He asks Charlie about the murders at Freddy's, knowing that Charlie is from Hurricane, which causes her to snap at him. This causes memories to re-arise. The hook above, poised to strike, no escape. A figure looming behind the stage, red matted fur, barely concealing the metal bones of the murderous creature, kneeling in pitch dark on the cold tile floor of the bathroom, and then that giant hard plastic eye glaring through the crack, the hot miasma of breathless life on her face, and the other, older memory, the thought that made her ache in ways for which she had no words, sorrow filling her as if it had been wrought into her very bones. She and Sammy, her other self, her twin brother, were playing their quiet games in the familiar warmth of the costume closet. Then the figure appeared in the doorway, looking down on them. Then Sammy was gone, and the world ended for the first time. Charlie begins working on her robotics project that she's been keeping hidden from Jessica the whole time. 2 mechanical faces were held upright on metal structures and attached to a length of board. Their features were indistinct, like old statues worn away by rain or new clay not yet fully sculpted. They were made of malleable plastic, and where the backs of their heads ought to be, there were instead microchips and wires. The 2 heads start communicating with one another as she turns them on, turning to one another and chatting using basic phrases. Charlie decides to finally show Jessica her project, and it causes Jessica to seem pretty uncomfortable. Jessica notices Theodore, Charlie's childhood toy animatronic rabbit, in the corner, but notices in horror that it's been torn apart, ripped into pieces. Charlie explains that she's been using him for parts. "Oh, Charlie, what's wrong with you?" Jessica thinks. Charlie meets up with John and they go and grab lunch. John explains that he's been working a job in construction, university being too expensive, and that he's currently working in Hurricane, that there was recently a tornado there deemed the Storm, that tore apart many of the houses. Timidly, John reveals that Charlie's dad's house was one that had been damaged, but not completely destroyed. She had never gone to check or visit. John expresses concern as to whether Charlie is okay. It's seeming that she's been struggling since the incident the past year. She explains that it's been her birthday recently, and this made her feel like she lost Sammy again. He's disappeared. That sense of completeness is gone. It happened on my birthday. I woke up, and I just felt... She sighed, searching. There wasn't a word for it. But the thing is, it's not just loss. It's like he's trapped somewhere. I have these dreams where I can feel him on the other side of something. Like he's so close to me, but he's stuck somewhere. Like he's in a box. Or I'm in a box. I can't tell. John asks her to go on a date that night, which she agrees to, planning to go to dinner, and she runs out to class. On her way in, Charlie is stopped by Clay Burke. He tells Charlie that they have found a body and they would like her to have a look at it. Charlie sits in the car with Clay, where they anxiously discuss the events at Freddy's a year ago. Clay notes that Carlton, who is now studying acting, seems to be having nightmares about it, and Charlie admits that she does too. As they arrive at the crime scene, a massive field filled with cows, and uncomfortable and sinister air fills the space. Clay shows Charlie over to the twisted, deformed, dead body. It was a man, stretched in a ghastly posture on his back, his limbs contorted impossibly. In the glaring, unnatural light, the scene looked staged. He might have been an enormous doll. His whole body was drenched red with blood. His clothes were torn, almost shredded, and through the holes, Charlie thought she could see ripped up skin, some bone, and other things she couldn't identify. Charlie, observing the body, realizes immediately the unmistakable scars of a springlock suit, and that this man had to have been killed by one. Charlie asks Clay if Freddy's has been torn down, to which he responds that it has been partially torn down. It had been begun being demolished, but was not finished, though he seriously warned her never to go back. He states some very concerning information, that the blood found at the crime scene around Dave was actually fake blood, and his body was never found. He survived it once, Clay states, concerned. Dave already had scars all over his body from one springlock incident. Charlie heads back to her room to change before her date with John, while being extremely shaken up from the crime scene, seeing the fresh springlock scars and remembering that she had done that to Dave. John and Charlie go on their date, which is quite awkward and tense. John discusses that he had a relationship after what happened at Freddy's, causing Charlie to become jealous, but John expresses that it ended because he was holding something back. He couldn't tell her what had happened at Freddy's, and how it had affected him. Charlie keeps remembering touching the dead body, and has to go to wash her hands in the bathroom, filled with anxiety. Still, they head out to the movies and watch a zombie movie. Charlie tries to relax, but she can't stop thinking. Charlie becomes irritated by her overthinking, so she ends up stepping out to get some fresh air, and while doing so, she decides to use the payphone to call Clay. She asks if he has had any updates or found anything new, but he has nothing to tell her, so she heads back into the movie theater, unable to stop thinking about the corpse and the state that it was in. Charlie apologizes for being distant, and decides to walk on campus with John to explain what happened with Clay, and her fear that Dave is still alive. Charlie heads back to her room, and Jessica is asking her questions non-stop about the date. Realizing that this is what Jessica has her interest in, Charlie asks if she will go clothes shopping with her the next morning. Before going to bed, Charlie works on her project. The faces, while only being able to talk while switched on, are constantly listening to every conversation, constantly learning and picking things up. Their conversation tonight seems to mirror the one they've just listened to between Charlie and Jessica. This conversation seems unsettling to Charlie in a strange sort of way. Charlie has a nightmare about her project. As she stared, puzzled, a baby began to cry. She stood at once, knocking her head painfully on the edge of the desk. The two faces suddenly looked more human and more childlike. One was crying, the other watching with an astonished look on its face. She is awoken by her own screaming, as John arrives at her room, but she pulls herself together and invites him in. She can't bring herself to tell him that her course is robotics, describing it as computer programming, but she still shows John her project, nervous of what he might think. I'm still working out the kinks, but this thing should make the person wearing it visible to them. Not literally visible, I mean. They can't see, but they'll recognize the person wearing the device as one of them. Charlie sends John away, claiming to be going shopping with the very excited Jessica, but as Charlie pulls up to an abandoned Freddy's, Jessica is shocked and concerned. Still, they go in and look around the torn-apart Freddy Fazbear's. Everything that was once inside now gone, and the rooms almost unrecognizable in their deconstruction and damage. At first they can't find anything. They look around at the destroyed, abandoned building and see nothing of importance. Charlie spots a lone animatronic eye, but ignores it. Just as they're about to leave, Jessica notices that Pirate's Cove is still more intact than the rest of the place. They explore behind the curtain and find a storage area, and yanking it open, the yellow rabbit suit comes flying out with Dave's body inside. This is described like Springtrap, a corpse rotting beneath an animatronic rabbit suit. Charlie concludes from this, of course, that Dave, or William, didn't fake his own death. They could see Dave's body through the gaps in the costume, and the wide, carved eyes of the mascot's head showed through to his face. His skin was desiccated and shriveled, his eyes were wide open, his face expressionless and discolored. After the lecture, Artie asks her to help him study at the library, which she does. He's clearly flirting with her, to which she's very clearly dismissing. As she looks over her notes, she realizes doodles that she doesn't remember drawing, rectangles in every spare space of the paper. She has the thought that it may somehow be a message from Sammy, and runs out disheveled, determined that she has to go to her father's old house. When she got to the door, she stopped, her guts twisting. There's something wrong. She hesitated, her hand suspended in the air as if something was blocking her path. She finally took hold of the knob, and instantly her hand felt fused to it, as if by an electrical current. She couldn't turn it, and she couldn't let go. Suddenly the knob moved on its own. Someone was turning it, from the other side. As Charlie begins her drive to Hurricane, she feels that something is wrong. She sees large birds, turkey vultures, around a carcass and knows that she has to check it. She is right, and she finds the body of a dead woman, covered in scars from a spring-lock suit again. She notices and feels terrified by the fact that the woman looks similar to her. Charlie goes to the nearest gas station to call Clay Burke. It's a run-down, dodgy gas station, and the attendant pulls an unfortunate prank on her, getting her to look in the cooler where a large taxidermied animal head is staring up at her. Regardless, she calls Clay and gets him to meet her near the body. He seems almost suspicious of her, but also notices that the dead body looks just like Charlie. When Clay says to Charlie that she could be your twin, something snaps in Charlie and she replies that she absolutely could not be her twin. They find the ID of the woman, Tracy Horton, and Clay reveals that another body was found that morning. Charlie is determined to help stop this. Clay gives her 20 minutes before reporting to the police to look through Tracy's house. She goes there and looks through the house and her car, finding nothing unusual, but in the backyard she finds 3 strange deep holes in the ground. Charlie is heading away from the house when she realizes that she's 2 hours late for her date with John. She rushes to the restaurant, disheveled and covered in dirt, to which she finds a concerned John. She panics, and when going to clean up in the bathroom, the same thing happens with the door handle, fusing to her hand and leaving her frozen. Charlie doesn't tell John what happened, but she calls Clay and gets the addresses of the other victims, heading with John to her old house to find some sort of connection. They arrive at the old house, damaged and weathered from the storms. Walls have fallen down and pieces of the house are falling apart. John's leg gets stuck in the stairs as he walks up and the step collapses, and Stanley the unicorn is lying on his side, ripped off his tracks. Ella still stands silently in her closet, undamaged, holding her cup of tea. Charlie looks at the 3 closets, the doors, and makes the connection that the rectangles she's been subconsciously drawing were doors, though she wasn't sure where to. John and Charlie go into the backyard and see that Charlie's father's garage has been destroyed, trees fallen on top of it. Charlie frantically pulls away the roof and wall, going inside the workshop and tearing it apart, searching for something, tearing everything off the shelves. They look over from the shed to the house, and Charlie sees the remains of a room that she doesn't recognize, a small room hidden between the other rooms in the house. It has 3 matching deep holes, and Charlie now admits to John what she has seen, finding the body and the holes in the yard. In one of the holes, they find a strange animatronic buried in it. Charlie couldn't guess what kind of animal it was supposed to be. Running down the center of its face was a strong, straight split, exposing wires and a line of metal frame. A thick plastic material was stuck to its face in large patches. It was too large for a human being to wear, probably 8 feet tall when standing. Still, Charlie couldn't shake the feeling that she recognized this creature, Foxy. Charlie recognizes some of the hardware as her father's work, but some of it is foreign, someone else is doing. As she continues digging to get the animatronic out, it triggers some sort of mechanical trap. The animatronic's arms lifted and its chest opened like an iron gate. Its metal pieces slid out of place to reveal a dark, gaping pit where the sharp spikes and spring locks were just barely visible. It was a trap, waiting to be triggered. The animatronic also begins to illuminate, showing the illusion of fur and flesh somehow. The creature grabs Charlie, pulling her towards it. She struggles against it, and John manages to rip its head off, stopping its attack. He instantly feels very nauseous, and Charlie realizes it's due to a disc inside the animatronic, still making a ringing noise. As she turns it off, the animatronic changes. The illusion of fur and flesh was gone. It was nothing more than a broken robot with unfinished features. She slipped her nail back into the groove and flipped the tiny switch. Before their eyes, the fractured and worn face became fluid and smooth, warping into something lifelike. Charlie and John head back to Charlie's dorm room, and look through her box of spare parts to find anything out of the ordinary. They find another disc like the one they had found in the monster. Charlie also notices an elbow joint that she knows her father didn't make. As they inspect the strange disc, they notice writing carved into it: Afton Robotics, LLC. This being connected to William Afton, Henry's old partner and Dave's real name. They head to the car and circle the addresses of each of the murdered victims. Charlie notices in the corner of the map another rectangle, a door that she doesn't remember drawing. They map out the addresses, noticing that there is a pattern, each victim's house being about 3 miles away from one another in the same direction, starting from her dad's old house. Jessica appears behind them and announces that she wants to come with them and demands to know what's going on. As they feel Jessica in and drawn away to the direction of the line would end, they realize with horror that the animatronics are headed towards Charlie and Jessica's dorm, and that they are after Charlie. The woman looking like her had not in fact been a coincidence. They head out in the direction of where the next victim would be following the pattern, hoping to stop the animatronics before they can attack again. The group head into an abandoned looking area, with lots of half-constructed and empty buildings. They look for a while to no avail, but as Charlie pauses and wonders what she's missing, she gets a feeling that something isn't right, coming from an abandoned lot. It is a dirty old construction dumping ground. Charlie wields a shovel, John a crowbar, and Jessica a flashlight. Charlie soon finds soft dirt and starts digging until she hits a metal animatronic. They keep digging and find it's some sort of twisted Freddy. It was Freddy, but somehow not. The bear's eyes were open, glazed over with the inanimate look of lifelessness Charlie knew so well. The bear was dormant, for now. The group head off and decide that they must contact Clay. Jessica and John go to the gas station to call Clay while Charlie waits with the animatronic. Both are nervous to leave her alone, but she convinces them to do so. John and Jessica arrive at the same rundown gas station. The kid behind the counter pulls the same prank with the taxidermied head on John, who is less forgiving than Charlie and throws it out onto the road. They call Clay, and John, Jessica, and Clay all turn back up where the animatronics lie, and Charlie is waiting. They show Clay the Twisted Freddy, and he evacuates all the people living in the area, claiming that there's a gas leak. As they're looking at the Freddy head, the features smooth over and change just like the Foxy did before, and they all quickly leave in Clay's police car. They discuss the strange disc as Charlie inspects it in the car. She connects the dots on how the disc works, explaining a concept that had been discussed in a university lecture at the start of the book, that in a world of constant sensory input, our minds often fill in the blanks for us based on our previous experiences, causing us to see things as they should look. She concludes the discs are doing just that, causing them to perceive the animatronics as those that they should have already seen, the way that they should look. Clay is driving, the kid's asleep, remembering his last conversation with his ex-wife, how his constant working had ruined his marriage, him unable to focus on anything but the missing children's case. As he's driving, he notices the street lights flicker, and then go out. Certain that this is connected somehow, he heads with his flashlight over to the mounds. Charlie wakes up from her sleep and realizes something is wrong, running after Clay. He keeps telling her to go back to the car, but she is determined. They hear a human scream, and Charlie runs towards it, until she is disoriented and lost, trying to help find the victim. Instead, she comes face to face with a wolf. The thing lurched to the side, then stepped towards her, revealing a sleek snout. A wolf's mane ran over the top of its head and down its back. It was stopped over, one arm twisted downward while the other flailed up. Perhaps its control over its limbs was uncertain. It was looking at Charlie, and she met its eyes. They were piercing blue and self-illuminating. Yet while the eyes held a steady light, the rest of the creature was in flux, morphing in a disorienting fashion even as she watched. One moment it was a groomed and agile figure covered in silver hair, the next a tattered metal framework partly coated in rubbery translucent skin. As she stares at the wolf and Clay joins behind her, the wolf's chest opens up and drops out a body. A woman who had been caught and trapped inside. It drops her to the ground and slinks away. The woman still has a pulse, and Clay stays with her trying to help, as the others run off to get more help. Chapter 9 begins with Charlie sitting in class, doing an exam but entirely unable to focus. She keeps replaying the events of the night before and the twisted wolf. She asks herself why her father, who had been so frugal, reusing parts from animatronics and destroying those that didn't work properly, had kept these animatronics stored and buried in the house rather than destroying them. The exam finishes without Charlie having done any of it, too busy drawing faces of the monsters flashing through her head. After her exam, John meets Charlie in the hall and tells her the updates Clay has given them, that the next location was an empty and vacant space with no people. Due to this, Clay decided the next night would be then they would go out on their mission to fight and defeat these twisted animatronics. Charlie feels uncertain, very sure that the animatronics are coming for her alone. She goes back to her room, packs a duffel bag including the head of Theodore, and heads out herself. She heads to the next house on the map. It's in the middle of nowhere, a lone, staged house. All of the appliances are fake and staged. Charlie opens all the doors, seriously nervous, and lies down, waiting for the twisted animatronics. She knows it's her that they want, and thinks that this will somehow give her answers. She laid down on the bed and tried to conjure her nightmares, gathering up those final moments with Sammy and holding them close to her like a talisman. Hold on, she thought, I'm coming. Meanwhile, John is waiting at a restaurant for Charlie as she's running late. He starts to get nervous, knowing that Charlie isn't the type to wait around if she knows something is coming for her. He grows concerned and calls Clay, who comes to help him find Charlie. Charlie is waiting in the room with her eyes closed, impatiently as night falls. She can't stop thinking about Sammy. Flashbacks of the moment he was taken, but then she hears something inside of the house. Charlie sees two animatronic silhouettes in the second bedroom, and at this point we realize she isn't planning on running away or fighting. When she said that the animatronics were after her and she needed to stop this, she meant by sacrificing herself before anyone else could be killed along the way. Also, somehow thinking that this will get her to Sammy. She goes back into the other bedroom and lies on the bed. Closing her eyes, she can hear multiple animatronics around her. Charlie opens her eyes just in time to watch Freddy attack her. Freddy's jaw made motions of chewing as the distorted face pulled Charlie's legs inside it. His cheeks and chin dislocating further, it no longer resembled a living thing. Panic took hold and Charlie screamed. She clenched her fists, but there was no longer a face to strike. There was only a squeezing and spiraling vortex of fur, teeth, and wire. Before she could struggle further, her arms were pinned to her side, trapped inside the thing. Only her head remained free. She gasped for a last breath, then was violently scooped up, consumed by the creature. John and Clay arrive at the scene, and Charlie is no longer there. They see her sneakers and footprints through the house, and Clay looks at the ground, unsure of what to do next. John and Clay set out to try and find Charlie. They follow the direction that the animatronic must be heading, and wait in a field that they will have to pass through in order to get to their next destination. Jessica soon arrives after them and exclaims that the animatronics won't be headed in this direction anymore. They were headed towards Charlie. The group panic and intend to circle around the area, but the teens ask Clay if he knows where the original animatronics were. Maybe they could help them somehow, or answer some questions. Clay reveals that he actually has them, this being what ended his marriage when his wife had found out. He takes Jessica and John down to the basement to see them, the original animatronics. They look at them, Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, and Golden Freddy, and as John stares into the eyes of Golden Freddy, the animatronics turn to face him, following his movements with their heads. Anxiously, he tries to ask for their help. We don't think they were built by Henry, we think they were built by William Afton. As soon as John said the name, the robots all began to shudder, convulsing where they sat. It was as if their machinery was being jump-started by a current too powerful for their systems to absorb. John begs for their help, and the animatronics start convulsing, to which Clay demand they leave. They board up the door and run away, and the animatronics manage to break out, but they don't come after them. They walk past the three hiding in the house, shaking the entire foundation, and they run out of the house in the other direction. It was like looking at the inside of a mask, the hollow of a protruding snout, the blank spheres that were the back of the eyes. When she carefully tilted her head up, she could even see the bolt that attached the black top hat. Charlie wakes up inside the twisted Freddy animatronic suit, covered in cuts and bruises. She needs to stay very still. and the animatronic is walking and thrashing around. John, Jessica, and Clay are searching for Charlie when they find a strange, shadowy figure made of wires that somewhat resembles Freddy. They follow it. It was almost featureless and flat, scarcely distinct from the shadows. John squinted, trying to get hold of the image, to assure himself he was really seeing it. This is a reference to FNAF 2's Shadow Freddy. Charlie awakes again, now in the ground, her mouth filling with dirt as she is being buried alive in the springlock suit. Slowly and cautiously, she manages to slip out of the suit, moving slowly around the springlocks limb by limb, then having to dig her way out of the ground. But she survives. The place she arrives out of the ground in is a strange restaurant that she at first mistakes for Freddy's. All of the game machines have a large mascot on each, many she doesn't recognize. As Charlie explores, finding a waterfall, she keeps hearing a child's voice saying hello, until she finally stumbles upon Balloon Boy. It was just another animatronic, or perhaps just a normal doll, made to look like a little boy selling balloons. He was perhaps 4 feet tall, with a round head and a round body, his arms almost as long as his stout legs. He wore a red and blue striped shirt and matching propeller beanie on his head. He was made of plastic, but his shiny face had something old-fashioned about it. As Charlie remains in the room, something feels very wrong. She feels dizzy and her head is heavy, her vision blurring and becoming disoriented. 2 creatures rip out of the mounds of dirt, shaking the ground. The surface undulated chaotically. There was a strange ringing in the air, and though she only now registered it, she realized it had been sounding all along. She stopped in her tracks and looked desperately for the source, but her vision was clouding and her thoughts were slow. She could barely name the things she saw. Rectangle, she thought fuzzily. Circle, no, sphere. She looks up to see several smiling children, presumably more animatronics, standing around her, and she keeps running away from the twisted things. Charlie runs away from the animatronics and ends up in a small room, sitting down to try and catch her breath. The room only dimly illuminated with one orange light bulb. As her eyes adjust to the room, she realizes she is surrounded by unfinished mascots. In the mass, she notices Freddy. Charlie sees Freddy move, and decides she needs to try and sneak past him, but as she sneaks out, he sees her and grabs her leg. Charlie hears a familiar voice and manages to open the door, being met with John, Jessica, and Clay. Charlie keeps seeing the children running around, and Jessica realizes it's the lights that are causing her to see this, so John shoots them out. The children were no longer children. They were wind-up toys, plastic boys in striped shirts wearing plastic smiles and propeller beanies and offering balloons. They realize the sound from the discs causes very strange effects. Everything had changed when Clay shattered the fixtures. The realistic beasts and vicious-looking creatures were gone, replaced with strange, hairless versions of themselves. They no longer had eyes, only smooth, raised bumps of blank plastic. Charlie pries the chip out of the destroyed Freddy, revealing that the bullet was lodged into the chip. Just as they start to relax, a wolf and a giant twisted bunny stalk out, surrounding them. Charlie cries out to them, asking what they want from her, when out of the shadows, a strange figure the size of a man appears. The man that was once William Afton, now fused to the spring Bonnie suit that killed him, steps forward to reveal himself. He wore what had once been a mascot suit of yellow fur, though what remained was now green with mold. Springtrap reveals that when he was fused to the suit, he became in control of the other animatronics. See? All the animatronics are linked together. It was a system designed to control the choreography for the shows. Now I control the system. I control the choreography. All of this belongs to me. I was imprisoned in that tomb beneath the stage, scarcely able to move, only able to see through the eyes of my creatures. He gestured at the 2 who stood behind him. But for all that I could see, I was trapped. Eventually they would have broken me out, but having you do it yourself was a delightful surprise. Quietly and swiftly, Clay shoots at Springtrap and yells at the group to run. They all run towards the exit. They cross the waterfall and fountain as the animatronics begin to wade in, but it's quickly revealed that this river is gasoline. Clay lights the animatronics on fire, and at this Springtrap slinks away. Charlie starts running after him, and Clay calls and tries to run after her, but the inflamed animatronics are now blocking the pathway, and Charlie is running after Springtrap. She can feel Sammy near her, and runs with purpose. She begins to see strange hallucinations, but now realizes that they aren't real, and she keeps on running. John, Clay, and Jessica go to leave, planning to find another way to help, when Bonnie, Freddy, and the wolf begin to surround them. Charlie finally comes to an opening, where Springtrap grabs her and chokes her, but she manages to shove him off her. We quickly change back to Jessica, John, and Clay, who are staring at the 3 animatronics, accepting imminent death, when suddenly, the wolf is attacked by something in the shadows. the original Foxy. The twisted Bonnie goes to grab John, but the original Bonnie attacks it, ripping it apart. Meanwhile, as Charlie runs to leave, Springtrap jumps on and attacks her. She finds a metal spike in the ground, and as he goes to jump at her again, she lodges it into his chest, demanding answers from him. "Tell me why," she hissed. It was the question that consumed her, the thing that kept coming back in her nightmares. Now he said nothing, and she rocks the stake back and forth in his chest. He made a gagging cry of pain. "Tell me why you took him. Why did you choose him? Why did you take Sammy?" John, Jessica, and Clay head towards the cave, but as they do, a group of balloon boys clatter out of the cave, wobbling around towards them as if to attack. Suddenly, the original Freddy comes crashing in, knocking the balloon boys down and crushing them easily. The group run into the cave to find Charlie, following the blue light. Clay pulls Charlie away from Springtrap, but she keeps turning back to confront him. She asks why he chose Sammy, why he took him, to which he keeps refusing to answer. But eventually he says, "I didn't choose him, I chose you." Springtrap manages to slip out of her grip, and slides away just as the building begins to crash and collapse around them. Charlie keeps wanting to go back, to find Springtrap, but the group all start to leave and find their way out. As they exit, they find themselves in the room under Charlie's father's old house, where the twisted animatronics had been buried. There is crashing and destruction. As everything pulls apart, the group quickly clambers out, but Charlie is again drawn to the wall at the back of the room. John reaches his hand out to her, calling after her to come out. As the building goes up in smoke, Charlie cannot leave, cannot pull herself away from the wall. She hears a heartbeat through the wall. John comes back into the burning building, begging and pleading with Charlie to come with him, and telling her that he loves her. Finally, he manages to pull her away to come with him, but just as she's climbing out, the mangled, twisted Freddy grabs her, pulling her into its massive chest. John and Jessica are trying to help Charlie out of his layered teeth, John holding onto Charlie's hand as she's being drawn in, unable to grab at the animatronic so as to not trigger the spring locks. Suddenly, a single high-pitched click reverberated through the air. John and Clay froze, their hands still hovering above Freddy's chest. For a moment, the air stood still. Then the metal body convulsed violently. It launched itself off the ground, and a ghastly crunch of metal pierced the air. All three pulled back instinctively. Clay and John jumped away from the thing, and Jessica scrambled backwards, dropping Charlie's hand. The suit fell again and was still. The arm was splayed on the ground at an awkward angle. The room was silent. "Charlie?" John said softly. Then his face went white. The police arrive, dragging John and Jessica from the scene. Charlie is dead. John fights back, not wanting to leave. Jessica and John are sitting at the diner. Jessica unable to accept that Charlie is dead. John completely defeated and miserable. Artie comes to join them at the table, and claims that he and Charlie were going to date, which frustrates John. Marla comes to join them, supporting them, as John remembers the night of Charlie's death. The woman, kneeling in the pool of Charlie's blood, holding her hand, he had only glimpsed at her for a moment. She had looked almost as surprised to see him as he was to see her, but there was something familiar about her. He turned away from the others again and closed his eyes, trying to picture it. Dark hair, dark eyes. She looked severe and unafraid. John realizes that Charlie's Aunt Jen had been there. The story ends when the group see a woman stepping out of her car. They all think it's Charlie and run to her, but John realizes watching from afar that it's not Charlie. The third and final book in this trilogy is The Fourth Closet, which of course also has a corresponding graphic novel. This book begins jumping straight into John's dream, a mixture of nightmare and memory. He is tearing through the house as it's falling down around Charlie, and he manages to get to her. They reach the strange wall, and Charlie gets stuck to it, being taken away by a maniacally laughing figure. John wakes up and heads to work. He's extremely distracted and can't stop thinking about what has happened, thinking about William Afton and Charlie. His boss lectures him about focusing. He's talking to a co-worker when she mentions a new children's place opening with robots. John goes home. He's currently living in a temporary accommodation apartment and gives his rent to his unfriendly landlord. John still has the old, broken Theodore head on his bedside table. It smells bad and he goes to throw it out, but he can't bring himself to, having been doing this for a while. He goes to sleep in front of the TV and has another nightmare about watching Charlie die in the springlock suit. John is unsettled after waking up from this dream, so he walks on the side of the road. One of the cars stops by him and Jessica gets out saying hi to him. She pleads with John to talk to Charlie, to which we discover Charlie has shown back up alive, but John refuses to talk to her, adamant that she's dead. adamant that he saw her die. Jessica says that Carlton is going to be around that Saturday and pleads again for John to come by. We cut to a scene of a man working in a junkyard dump. A woman walks in and starts asking him about something that was dumped there, interrogating him. She mentions the police being called here the previous day because this man thought he had heard children screaming from within the machinery heap. The woman asks the man, Bob, to take her there. John shows up late for work and ends up being fired. As he heads home, he considers meeting up with the group that night. He thinks of Dave in the unbelievable, uncanny way he came back to life, survived the spring locks, and then was seemingly killed but lived on a spring trap. But he doesn't feel as if Charlie is the same. John ends up showing up to catch up with the group at Clay's house. He's greeted by Marla, Jessica, and Carlton, who all express having not seen John for a long time. They give updates on their lives, noting that Lamar won't be visiting or ever visiting Hurricane again after what happened. The topic of Charlie comes up. Jessica explains that Charlie had moved out of the dorm room and left without warning, her being unsure where she was now living. John goes to leave, heading to his car, but he's stopped by Charlie on his way. It's not her. She looked like some stunning cousin of Charlie's maybe, but not her, not the round face, frizzy-haired, awkward girl he had known almost all of his life. She was taller, thinner, her hair longer, darker. Her face was uncannily different, though he couldn't have explained how. Her posture, even as she stood hugging herself in anxiety, was somehow elegant. As he looked at her, the first shock of recognition gave way to an acute revulsion. He took an involuntary step back. How can anyone think that's her, he thought. As she speaks to him, though, he begins to feel more convinced that it's her. John asks Charlie if she remembers what he had said to her before she'd been trapped in the suit, when he told her that he loved her. She said she was sorry that she couldn't remember, that there was so much that she couldn't remember about that day. John agrees to meet up with Charlie the following day at the same Italian place they'd gone on dates before, him testing her by saying, the same place, and he drives away. We change to Charlie's perspective. She expresses the hurt of having John not believe she is herself, and what happened the day she'd shown up at the diner and John had ignored her. Jessica comes out and comforts Charlie. This chapter begins with a cutscene of somebody, presumably William Afton, designing new animatronics, injecting them with a strange substance in a syringe and using heat. He describes doing this with a woman, who communicates with him and watches the animatronics with concern. At the end of this scene, it is revealed that this woman too is an animatronic. John sits in his apartment writing down everything that he knows for a fact about Charlie, his memories with her throughout childhood and onwards. He questions whether or not it really could be Charlie, if it could be her twin. Could Sammy have been short for Samantha? Nothing makes sense to him. He hears a clicking noise coming from Theodore's head. Clay shows up to his house, coming to check on John. He also wants to ask John to see if he can find out anything more about that night from Charlie, mentioning Charlie's intrigue when finding out John had seen Aunt Jen. John is cynical and sarcastic to Clay. Theodore's head keeps ticking, until it ends up suddenly turning its head, something it had never done before. As John heads out to his date with Charlie, he is walking through the town when he finds himself where the movie theatre used to be, coming across a new building, Circus Baby's Pizza. He walks in, getting closer and closer to the stage, going to pull back the curtain, but he is stopped by a staff member, then swiftly leaving. Jessica is coming home with her groceries to her new apartment. She'd moved into it about 6 months ago, when Charlie had moved out of their dorm room, and now has a small old apartment to herself. As she unpacked her groceries, she got an unsettling feeling. She looked around and checked the door was locked. It was. As she turns into her room, Charlie's in the hallway, shocking Jessica. She apologizes, stating that the door was unlocked, and asks Jessica for advice on her date with John. She also asks if Jessica could remember what John had said to her and she had forgotten. Charlie and John go out on their date at the same Italian restaurant they had previously gone out to. They meet and it's tense, John repeatedly trying to test Charlie, trying to figure out if it's really her, asking about their shared memories and things only Charlie would know. When Charlie asks what John had said that night, he seems hurt and let down that she doesn't remember. He keeps questioning Charlie, who doesn't feel able to eat on their date. Charlie expresses not really remembering what had happened after she'd seemingly died, how she'd survived, how she got out. When Charlie asks John who he thinks she is, how she could possibly not be herself, he claims that he thinks what he saw. He saw her die. He wants to believe she's alive, but he knows what he saw. He shares his theory with Charlie that she was Sammy, to which she ends up maniacally laughing, reminding him he'd taken her to visit Sammy's grave. Charlie shares that Aunt Jen had rescued and cleaned her up that night, and vaguely avoids the topic as to whether or not she'd been staying with her, asking John if he'd heard from her and stating that everyone eventually leaves. It's a vague and nondescript conversation. Charlie asks John to go to the movies, but he says he has somewhere to be. On his way to his car, he notices the opening of Circus Baby's Pizza, a massive banner saying "Grand Opening, dress as a clown and eat free," explaining the large crowd of people dressed as clowns gathering around it. John shudders at this and drives away, deciding to drive to Clay's house. When John arrives, he goes to tell Clay about Charlie asking about her Aunt Jen, trying to figure out answers. He pauses as they both for a moment get a strange feeling of being watched, but continue. They discuss both Henry and Aunt Jen, that Aunt Jen was cold but took care of Charlie, that Henry was reclusive and disoriented, and that Charlie's mum left before they moved to Hurricane. As John goes to leave, he's anxious due to all of the people around dressed as clowns, but he sees a different strange figure in the middle of the road. The clown's movements were feminine but wrong. She walked like something mechanical yet graceful. His breath caught in his throat as the clown glided towards him like a wraith. The strange clown goes right past John, freaking him out. Meanwhile, Clay hears a noise and readies his gun, seeing something in the hall. As John returns back home, he hears Theodore making this strange noise, but this time saying something combined with static. He eventually figures it out. Shining Star, Silver Reef. He heads back to Clay to tell him, but when he arrives there, Clay's body is on the floor. He was on the floor, one side of his face slick with his own blood, more pooling beneath his head. His eyes were closed. John grabbed his wrist and pressed his fingers against the veins, hoping for a pulse. After a few frantic seconds, he found it. His door had been entirely ripped down and his desk turned upside down. John calls the police. We are met with another strange cutscene. Somebody causing pain to others and hissing, frozen like a frightened animal, trying to hide but completely exposed. Inner bloody screams silent to the world. Jessica and John are in the waiting room in the hospital, waiting to hear if Clay is okay. He requests for them to be allowed to come in and see him, and they do. He's very tired, drifting in and out of sleep, but he gives John an envelope filled with photos and a roll of film. These photos all being of their friendship group catching up. All the photos including Charlie. Jessica states that it seems like someone's hired a PI on them. When looking at the photos of Charlie and John at the restaurant, John notices that after he walks away from the restaurant, Charlie heads towards Circus Babies. Eventually, Carlton, Marla, and also Charlie show up at the hospital. John notices that Charlie is intentionally standing where she can't see Clay. Carlton is very worried about his dad. Jessica has to leave for class, reminding John he needs to pick her up that night for something, but John is uneasy once Jessica has left and goes to leave. As he's walking out, Jessica pulls him aside and introduces him to Anna, a woman whose son Jacob is missing and is getting help from Clay. She's there making sure he's okay, concerned. Jessica had realized that Silver Reef was a town near Hurricane, and that night her and John planned to head out there together. Following Theodore's instructions of Shining Star, Silver Reef, they see a house in the distance underneath a shining star. Knocking on the door, they discover that the house is that of Aunt Jen. She's a little on edge with them, but lets them come in as John shows her Theodore's head and explains the message. Jen is very suspicious but seems to be vaguely aware of what might be going on. They show Jen the pictures and explain what Clay had said before passing out. It has to have a maximum range. Jen is quite protective over Charlie, saying she is the one who has to be responsible for her, not them. Secrets petrify you. You harden yourself against the world to keep them safe, and the longer you keep them, the harder you become. John expresses how he feels that Charlie is not the same anymore, that it isn't her, or that she's being controlled, and this somehow seems to ring true to Jen, as she begins tearing up despite her tough and hard demeanour. Somebody knocks on the door and Jen sends them silently to run down the hall and hide in a room, behind a closed door. As they walk into the room, John stops in shock, seeing a bare endoskeleton holding a knife, the machine that Henry had used to end his life. The room they arrive in is a bedroom filled with cardboard boxes and animatronic parts. Down the hall, they hear Charlie come in, coming to visit Aunt Jen. John opens a large green chest, and is astonished to find another Charlie in it. She breathes, alive but is cold to the touch. Someone touched her cheek, a brief, startling spot of warmth. It was gone just as quickly, leaving her colder than before. "Come back," she tried to say, but she could not remember how to make the words come out. "Charlie," That's my name. Someone is saying my name. Charlie tried to open her eyes. I know that voice. Someone's arms reached down under her, lifting her from the cramped, dark place she'd been so long that memories of somewhere else seemed like dreams. They hear a loud scream and a bang, and John carries Charlie as the three of them hide in a closet. Jessica, thinking quickly, snaps the lock off the window and opens it, rushing back to the closet just in time. A figure in red runs into the room and quickly dashes out of the window. As they leave back through the house, they see that Aunt Jen is dead, slumped on the floor. We then change perspective to the running away Charlie, running down the hall, exhilarated and overjoyed from having killed Jen. John, Jessica, and the real Charlie are waiting in John's house, Jessica repeatedly saying that they need to take Charlie to the hospital as Charlie speaks. John seems to be figuring something out, thinking about Ella the doll that Clay had, and says he needs to go to Clay's house. He leaves, and Jessica deadbolts the door behind him, keeping watch on Charlie. John breaks into Clay's house and finds Ella in a mess of papers about Freddy's. As he tears through the piles of things, he finds a circuit board with one of the strange round discs that seems to change perception attached. He tests it out while looking at Ella, and it changes her completely. He set his jaw firmly and flipped the switch. In an instant, Ella was gone. In her place was a human child, a toddler. She had short, frizzy brown hair, and a round face set in a happy smile. Her chubby hands gripped the tea tray determinedly. Only her absolute stillness indicated that she was not alive. John calls up Jessica, asking her to meet him at the library with the envelope, now not containing the photos after fleeing Jen's, but still containing a roll of microfilm. As they sit in the library and observe the roll of film using a microfilm machine, they notice that strangely, in all of the images, Charlie is blurry. As John zooms in on the image of Charlie changes. It has a maximum range, he said softly. The figure that filled the screen was elegant and feminine, but it was not human. The face was exquisitely sculpted and split down the middle, a thin seam outlining where two halves met. The limbs and body were segmented plates, their colours almost iridescent. John also realizes this is the same figure he saw as he was leaving Clay's house before he was attacked. These things, these discs, they send out signals that overwhelm your brain, causing you to not see what's really in front of you. Now, that wouldn't work on camera obviously, but Henry thought of that too, so the frequency of whatever it emits causes the image to blur. They put two and two together and realize that Charlie has been replaced by this robot. Clay had figured out that there was a maximum range, and taking photos far away enough, he could see the robot as it really was. She didn't know everything though. She blamed all the gaps in her memory on the near-death experience. As Jessica ponders why she would have killed Jen, they then realize that the thing was probably after Charlie, and they'd now left her alone. They quickly rush back to John's place. Anyone can discover a fire already burning, but Henry found a unique spark, created something truly different, something he didn't deserve or intend to stumble upon. There's another short cutscene. A man is working presumably with the animatronic on something. As Jessica and John rush back to John's apartment, they're met at the door with the other, fake Charlie. John rushes in quickly, pretending he needs to clean, and manages to hide the real Charlie behind the couch, covered in a blanket. John managed, disconcerted, to be face to face with her moments after the real Charlie. This time he could see the differences. He could have written a list. The impression that this woman, with her glamorous allure, was simply Charlie, grown into her beauty with a grace and new self-assurance, was gone. Now the individual features stuck out on her face like warts, each one a marker that this was not Charlie. Nose too narrow, cheeks too hollow, eyes too far apart, hairline too high. As the fake Charlie comes into John's apartment, she makes it very obvious, not even trying to hide, that she is searching the house, looking for the real Charlie. She looks under the bed, in the cupboard, and in the medical cabinets to see if anyone's been hurt. As she sits on the couch scanning the room, John distracts her by asking her to go out again that night. She finally leaves, agreeing to the date. They realize they need to get Charlie some medical help, but John doesn't feel safe to take her to the hospital, so Jessica goes out to get Marla. Charlie stirs awake for a moment, talking to John. John explains a little bit about what's going on, explaining that somebody is pretending to be her. She can't say much, except for Afton. John has to head out onto his date with the fake Charlie, and she is waiting, quite aware that he is late. John meets the fake Charlie at the restaurant, as Jessica and Carlton sit hidden at another booth. John has a walkie-talkie strapped to himself and the button pressed down so as not to make noise unless necessary. She asks what he was doing in Silver Reef, seeming aware of what's going on. The facade is gone, he knows, and she knows that he knows. He said he was looking for an old friend, and that he found her. This shocks the fake Charlie, asking where she is. I don't know what it will take to show these people what you really are, John said, but I can try all sorts of things before you make it out that door. He grasped his soda glass, not looking away from her. I'll start with this glass of soda, then I'll try a chair over the back of your head, and we'll go from there. The fake Charlie smiles at him and leaves the restaurant. As Carlton bounds over to John to check on him, Jessica quickly bolts out. She jumps into the trunk of Charlie's car, sitting there and waiting to see where fake Charlie goes. She shows up at Circus Baby's Pizza. As she peers through the windows, eventually the fake Charlie catches sight of her, inviting her in and eventually trapping her against a wall. Jessica scrambles to leave, unsure if Charlie knows that she knows the truth, and blacks out as a chemical fills the air. Charlie's smile grew wider and wider, elongating impossibly. Then suddenly her lips were split at the middle as a wide seam appeared, bisecting her face from top to bottom. I can't see. Jessica closed her eyes and opened them again, but the darkness remained. She tried again, realizing with rising panic that she could not move. The air stank of something rotten, turning her stomach, and she forced herself to breathe deeply. Jessica wakes up tied up, and the creature in front of her keeps changing between the strange animatronic girl and looking like Charlie. The animatronic expresses that part of her is Charlie, and that she holds some of her memories, but she does not feel anything except in relation to her creator. I felt disappointment, she said, her voice growing more tense. Desperation. She looked out the window. A father's disappointment and a daughter's desperation, she whispered. Henry? Jessica gasped. The girl looked back at her. No, not Henry. He was more brilliant than Henry. I watched my father work from a distance, a great, great distance. The animatronic expresses emotionless memories, remembering her first capture and kill of a child from both her own and from the child's perspective, as Jessica tries to untie the knot around her hands. As she finally breaks out of the ropes and runs away, she is confronted at the door face to face with Springtrap, who chases her around and chants at her. She holds up a chair to try and protect herself. The image of Springtrap falters and disappears, as an old and decrepit William Afton comes out, revealing his true form. He flicks one of the small discs on and off, making Springtrap appear and causing the doll's appearance to change. As he opens up his coat and shows the scars on his chest and neck, the extent of his injuries are shown to Jessica. She hears a child scream in the distance, and then another. She asks Afton if he's been kidnapping children, and he states that those days are over for him. As Jessica talks to Afton, the animatronic girl begins to disinfect her hands and escape, pulling a table out from behind the wall, with something moving hidden under a towel. William reveals that he has had many surgeries, but that the fake blood of Freddy's was not his, that he truly bled. As Jessica presses on about the screaming children, the animatronic steps forward. All at once, the girl's stomach split open at the middle and outshot an enormous mass of wires and prongs. It reached its full extension and snapped, open and shut with a steely clank. Jessica realizes that this animatronic girl is Circus Baby, of Circus Baby's Pizzeria. The animatronic girl turns on her chip and quickly begins to change in appearance, promptly changing back. William reveals his fear of death, these being his desperate attempts to beat death, to live forever, and that he wants to do something with Jessica, though he would have preferred Charlie. Circus Baby finally takes the tarp off the table, revealing not a body, but a pile of cords and wires. As Circus Baby begins to put the antiseptic on again, William tells her to hurry up, calling her Elizabeth. This causes her to look nervous and scared. Afton explains what he is trying to do, to keep himself immortal, describing how the children have possessed the animatronics of Freddy's. The spirit follows the flesh, it would seem, and also the pain. If I wish to become my own immortal creation, my body must leave my spirit to its eternal home. Since I'm still experimenting, I move my flesh piece by piece. Inside the cupboard, as Circus Baby grabs an IV bag, Jessica sees many others, as well as a shelf that looks like vacuum-sealed cuts of meat. Afton now appears to be asleep. As Jessica sits there, Circus Baby makes her wash her hands and hands her a towel, explaining that she has to help. A leg, a finger, an eye socket. I recognize these parts, Jessica said, but there was no answer. These look like endoskeletons. From Freddy's, the original Freddy's, Jessica began, calculating in her head, measuring to herself how much this mass must weigh, and its size relative to the size of the endoskeleton she remembered. As the creature on the table moves around on its own accord, Jessica realizes that the children are still trapped inside it, and are still in pain. Circus Baby demands that she helps. She hands her the clamp and scalpel, as Circus Baby makes an incision into William Afton, operating on him and slicing him open. She pulls out Afton's kidney, handing it to Jessica for her to hold. She then transplants the kidney inside of the twisted endoskeletons, as it heats up and hisses. Piece by piece, Circus Baby explains. As the surgery finishes, Jessica screams and screams, to which she sees Charlie appear in front of her. An illusion. We are thrown immediately into Charlie's dream, where she is sitting in a field with her father, who quickly disappears. She looks around to find a door and hears somebody crying behind it, and she then bangs on the door aggressively. As Charlie wakes up in John's apartment, dizzy and in pain, she looks around, snippets of her dream coming back to her as she peers through all of the doors. Remembering more of her dream in her memory, remembering that before John had pulled her away from the strange door in her father's house, the door had begun to open. Marla, Carlton and John come into the apartment to help Charlie. Marla immediately comes to tend to her and take care of her, shaking her pulse. John seems angry and untrusting, which shocks Charlie, who hasn't seen him in a long time. He brings out Ella and shows the group what happens with the disc, how she turns from looking like the doll into looking like a human girl. John is tense, and Charlie doesn't know why. As John sits next to Charlie, relaxing more, he keeps turning the switch on and off, annoying Marla. John asks Charlie about the project she'd been working on the previous year, the two faces talking to one another that included an earpiece that would allow them to see and communicate with the wearer. He asks if there would be a way, rather than making the animatronics just be able to see one person, to make yourself invisible to the animatronics. Charlie suggests it could be possible, saying you'd have to switch the wires to invert the frequency. John brings Carlton aside and explains this to him, sending him to go and collect Charlie's things from Jessica's apartment. John sits back down with Marla, who is in complete shock at what had happened to Charlie. She'd been locked and kept in a box, and must have been fed or she would have died, but she can't really remember anything. Carlton heads to Jessica's apartment. She of course isn't there, but he lets himself in with the key under the mat, having a look around. He peers at the mementos on her corkboard, noticing that none of them are recent, and he sees a child's drawing in the corner. Something else caught his eye, a child's drawing pinned to the lower corner of the board. He bent down to look, and his throat caught. It was a crayon drawing of 5 children, smiling happily as they posed with a big yellow rabbit. In the bottom left corner, the artist had signed his name, and Carlton reached out to touch it lightly. "Michael," he whispered. He stared into the bright eyes of the rabbit behind the children, and his mouth went dry. "If only I could have warned you, somehow." Carlton finds the closet containing Charlie's things, and manages to find the experiment, in a box titled Weird Experiment. He plugs in and turns on the strange faces, who begin talking to one another. You, me, we, she. Carlton puts on the earpiece, becoming visible to them, and they begin speaking to him too. Carlton looks into the wires in the earpiece and is able to manage to switch them around, the faces no longer recognizing him. All of a sudden, Carlton feels someone behind him, but sees no one, until the entire room starts spinning. The room dipped under him like a ship bobbing in the ocean, and he fell to his knees, clutching the bed frame to steady himself. Suddenly, as the room stops spinning, Charlie appears above him, claiming John had sent her to help. Carlton notices quickly that there's something off about this Charlie. Her voice is too polished and hard. He tests this theory by mentioning the experiment and calling it the wrong thing to see how she reacts. "You know your old experiment?" Carlton's mind raced. "The one with the robotic hand that could play the piano," he added. "You remember?" "Right. How sweet of you to come get it." He knows that this isn't Charlie and tries to distract her. The animatronic Charlie tries to flirt with Carlton, who bluntly turns around when suddenly she turns into the animatronic. Just in the nick of time, Carlton manages to get the earpiece out of his pocket and onto his ear, and he instantly becomes invisible to the animatronic. Finally, she leaves defeated, and Carlton heads back to John's house. Meanwhile at John's house, Charlie is lying in bed when John comes in to visit her. She remembers what he had said to her the night she was in the twisted animatronic, bringing up quickly that John had told her that he loved her. Charlie remembers the events of the previous year, how she had fought with Springtrap, and how she had said he'd taken Charlie, not her brother. She asks how long she's been gone, trapped in the box, and John finally tells her, 6 months, and how Aunt Jen had been there that night, which Charlie didn't remember, not remembering anything about seeing Aunt Jen. She states that she has to see Jen, that Jen knows all of the secrets, and John looks at her, unsure of what to say. She realizes from the look on his face that Jen is dead, and remembers straight away that she had filed everything she knew away. John remembered seeing boxes filled with files at Jen's house, and Charlie says that they have to go there and find them. John warns her that the thing impersonating Charlie might look for her there, but she is decisive that they must go. Jessica wakes up disoriented and finds herself in a strange, grimy space with 4 children. She realizes that these are the new missing children, and that they're alive. She realizes that one is the son of the mother that she'd met, Jacob, and the other 3 children introduce themselves as Alana, Ron, and Lisa. They don't trust Jessica at first, but explain they were taken by Circus Baby, whose stomach opened and pulled them in. Jessica reassures the children that she will help them out of this, that she's dealt with things like this before and she's determined to help. Meanwhile, Carlton rushes back home to John's to find Marla by herself, John and Charlie having rushed out somewhere. Carlton tells Marla that he'd seen the fake Charlie and gives her an earpiece. Seeing ads for Circus Baby's pizza, they decide to go there. John and Charlie drive out to Aunt Jen's house and walk in, seeing Jen's dead body slumped in the corner. John shows Charlie the box he found her in, and they look through many boxes of files, clothes, and random items. Charlie finds a box with Henry written on it. First she sees his old shirt and drapes it over her shoulders, trying to work through these things quickly, despite her overwhelming emotions. She then finds a letter written by her father and addressed to Aunt Jen. I've warped and twisted my surroundings to the point where I can never be sure if I've completely settled back into reality. And even if I did manage to turn off everything I planted in the walls to deceive myself, I think my mind would deceive me still. I don't need clinical testing on the long-term effects of these devices to know I've undoubtedly done permanent damage to myself. I will always see what I want to see. But worse than that, there is this splinter, more like the stake, always deep into my heart, reminding me more and more every day that what I see is a lie. Through your patience and your indulgence of me, you've tried to keep me happy, but it's also somehow brought me back from this world I've made for myself. I think maybe it would have been better for you to not have indulged me. Then I could have excluded you from my bubble, convinced myself that you were crazy like everyone else. I have my Charlie here with me. You will never have to indulge me in her again. Rather than taking joy in her, I have cried over her. So many countless tears. Keep all the closets shut. Let them be tombs for my denial and my grievance. My only lasting instruction for you concerns the 4th closet. It is not enough to keep it shut. You must keep that one sealed and buried. My friend was already beginning to waken me to reality when I began what was to be her final stage. When I rose slightly from the depth of my despair, I saw that I had no choice but to cease my work, for I was only feeding my own delusion. My old faithful partner, who I can only hope now is in a grave of his own, took what I had begun and made something of his own, something dreadful. He crafted my beloved work into something of his own and endowed it with who knows what kinds of evil. I was able to stop him and seal away what he made, and you, Jenny, must ensure that the deal remains. I would instruct you to demolish the house if I could trust that it could be done effectively. Keep it, and make sure the world forgets it. Then, someday, after many decades have passed and no one remembers, fill it with every kind of flammable thing and burn it to the ground, standing close guard to put a bullet into anything that emerges from the rubble, no matter what or who it looks like. They find another pile of papers. There are many, many drawings of Ella. They see the measurements of these drawings increasing in height, much taller than the real Ella was. Charlie wonders if her father wanted to make her a companion to grow up with her after losing Sammy. They hear a noise and sneak through the house, trying to get out. They see a door slightly open and John peers inside. It is empty with an open window. He goes to check if the coast is clear to exit via the window, when Charlie realizes she can't push the door any further. Looking through a crack in the door, she sees an eye peering back at her, and then the door slams shut. She hears a loud banging, and soon her duplicate walks out. Charlie stared disbelievingly at her duplicate, her mind hazingly registering all the tiny differences between them as she struggled for words. "You're not me," Charlie managed to say, and her own face smiled cruelly back at her. "I'm the only you that matters." Carlton and Marla head to Circus Baby's, wearing an earpiece each. Carlton uses a lockpick set to pick the lock of the back door and they get in, looking around. They're shocked by how similar it looks to Freddy's. They see a group of children on the monkey bars and run over to check on them, but realize quickly that they're actually animatronics. They realize that the clowns cannot see them, that the earpieces are working. They walk through an arcade when a strange clown animatronic moves, but it also doesn't seem to register them. They go through an exit and end up in a mirror maze, trying to find their way through. But they soon discover that it's not an ordinary maze. The mirrors randomly open and close, opening and shutting where they can enter and exit. They end up stuck between 2 mirrors, no spaces to walk through, as a mirror closes behind them. But soon one of them opens up again. They hear a strange mechanical voice. I know you're in here. I'll find you. I know just where you are. They see a giant pair of eyes in the reflection watching them that eventually says, I see you. Another panel opens right in front of them to reveal an animatronic. Funtime Freddy. Carlton believes that Freddy looks straight at him, but he passes them through the exit. Marla figures out the way to get out by looking at the stage light shining into the maze, and they head through. Carlton realizes a way to lure Freddy and allows the panels to open for them. He smashes the mirrors, causing Freddy to head towards them and the panels to open. They do this until they get to the exit, but just as they are almost out, Carlton's earpiece falls out. Freddy sees him and heads towards him, but he gets it back on just in time as Marla throws it to him and they get out. They hear a scream from the distance and run towards it. Jessica is in the room with the children, who are telling her about what is outside the door. A strange, mangled animatronic. They speak about it with immense fear. As they're talking about it, they hear 3 steady knocks on the door, and then the wooden door handle slowly opens to reveal Mangle. Mangle manages to get hold of Jacob and takes him. The door handle starts to open again, but this time it's Marla and Carlton. They make a plan to rescue the children and get them out. Carlton will try to find Jacob, while Marla and Jessica, wearing the earpieces, will sneak out the other 3 children. Jessica and Marla head out with the children when they hear banging and screaming in the roof, something moving in a vent or crawl space. From the roof, Mangle's limbs punch through the plaster and Mangle comes down, chasing them down the hallway. They run as fast as they can and finally get to a pair of double doors that Marla jams shut using a sign. The group hide behind a cotton candy machine and a popcorn popper, and they slowly walk out, heading towards the entrance doors that they can now see. As they head out, the 3 animatronic clown children begin crawling towards the actual children, unable to see Jessica and Marla. They crawl towards them and bite at their feet. Jessica manages to throw one into the ball pit, and Marla rips one off a child as it climbs on top of her to attack, eventually getting all 3 in the ball pit, repeating their crawling motions and digging themselves deeper into the pit. However, as soon as they deal with these child animatronics, they see on the stage, in the spotlight, Funtime Foxy, who heads towards the children, banging and thrashing. Suddenly the fox's body began cracking apart. Metal plates split away from the center of its torso, from its arms and legs lifting out, splitting again and folding back, leaving only its canine head untouched, grinning maniacally as its body was horribly transformed. Jessica tells Marla to get the children out, as she takes out her earpiece and distracts Mangle. Marla manages to get them out as Jessica runs back to where they came from, running back to the popcorn machine. Mangle chases her and she realizes the earpiece has fallen out of her pocket. She's cornered. She sees the rungs of a playset maze and realizes that that's her way out. She frantically climbs up the rungs as Mangle tears them out from beneath her. She crawls through the plastic tunnel slowly and carefully, as it's designed for the weight of children. She notices countless eyes beneath her, staring up at her, but she tries to ignore them and keeps on crawling through. She continues crawling until the pipe begins to rattle and shake, then quickly seeing Mangle appear beside her, hanging over the outside of the plastic pipe. She continues to crawl, seeing an exit above the ball pit, lowering her way down to the ropes, but not able to climb down as the 3 child clowns snap beneath her. Mangle comes into the maze, crawling and following behind her, chasing her. As she hangs onto the ropes, she finds the earpiece wedged deep in her pocket. She waits for Mangle to lunge at her and quickly puts it in, jumping out of the way and causing Mangle to fly into the rope. Mangle gets tangled up in the netting, it eventually falling down and Mangle crashes tangled into the ball pit. Jessica can finally get out through the front entrance, where she meets Marla and the 3 children. Meanwhile, Carlton is searching for Jacob. He finds a vent that is easy to dislodge, and he hears a voice coming from it, so he crawls inside. The hallway is very strange, with signs of wear and children's drawings on the walls. He sees a single child sneaker on the floor. Shining the flashlight, he bumps into the puppet. His flashlight lit on a silently screaming face. Carlton jumped back, dropping the light. He snatched it up again, his heart thumping, and shone it on the figure. It was a jack-in-the-box stuck in its surprised position, a white-faced clown, its mouth gaping in perpetual laughter. Looking around, he sees a sign titled Hide-and-Seek Hallway. As he keeps crawling through there, he hears the Freddy voice, and suddenly Funtime Freddy lunges out from behind a door, having crammed himself into the small space. Carlton crawls quickly away from him until he finds a vent to escape from, entering into a large room that holds just a large spinning ride. Freddy continues to follow him, chasing him down behind the ride. Carlton is cornered as Freddy begins crawling under the ride, but he sees a large lever. Just as Freddy comes closer, he jumps up and turns on the machine, which crushes him with its beams and parts, destroying him. Freddy being destroyed, Carlton hears a scream and heads on further to find Jacob. Charlie is looking face to face with her duplicate, shocked and astonished. Twin reaches a hand out and says that father wants them to come home, leaving Charlie entirely bewildered. John tries to attack the duplicate, but she easily throws him off and continues to hurt him, morphing into looking more like the real Charlie as the loud ringing noise continues. She grabs John up by the chest, stopping his breathing, and grabs Charlie in the other hand by the neck, keeping them both pinned to the wall and running out of breath. Charlie finally says that she wants to talk, and the duplicate lets them both go. Meanwhile, Carlton runs through the halls, searching for the child, but every room looks the same, and he eventually gives up, defeated, feeling like he's been running in circles and chasing echoes. Charlie is trying to talk with her duplicate, who continues flushing with anger. Charlie continues to ask, "What are you?" but the duplicate keeps saying that this isn't the right question while snapping in and out of her forms, until Charlie realizes the right question. "What am I?" The duplicate Charlie begins to show Charlie a mix of memories, somehow allowing her to see the images herself, a mix of hers and Charlie's. This time it hurt, the ground was cold, and her arm ached where she had fallen on it. She looked for the paper, it was on the floor in front of her. Her gold star still shone bright, but he was standing on the page now. She looked up to see if he noticed, tears in her eyes. She knew she should leave it, but she couldn't. She reached forward to tug at the corner, but it was too far away. She finally crawled to it on her knees, her dress dirty now, and tried to pull the page from under his shoe. It wouldn't come loose. Now she was looking at herself in the mirror, holding a stick of lipstick that she'd stolen from her teacher's purse, but she wasn't painting her lips with it. She was drawing bright red circles on her cheeks. The lips came next. She pulled the sheet away from the beautiful clown girl, beckoning her to speak. Where was the button, the one he always pressed? The eyes lit up first, and then other lights from within. It didn't take long for the painted face to search the room and find her, greeting her with a sweet smile and a soft voice. Then there was screaming. It was coming from me, but... She paused and pointed to her own head with a look of curiosity, but I remember seeing her scream. Charlie doesn't believe her story, and as the duplicate introduces herself as Elizabeth, she refuses to believe that this is an innocent girl. The duplicate explains that the anger is not from Elizabeth, it was from a different father. While reminiscing on lying in the field with Henry, Charlie protests that it is her memory, but the duplicate corrects her, and shows her her own memories. Agony erupted, flooding the room with its sound. The walls went black and streams of water poured down from behind the window curtain. Something cradled tightly in his arms, and when his mouth opened, the room shook with the sound of his anguish. "You don't recognize her?" Elizabeth said. "That's Ella, of course. It's all your father had left after you were taken." As Charlie's memories pop up, she remembers the animatronic creature in the corner with the burning silver eyes, and asking to herself, does it hurt? Elizabeth responds to this question now, saying yes, it did hurt. Elizabeth states that Charlie wasn't there yet, but she protests that she remembers. "You remember," Elizabeth mocked. "Are you sure you were there for all of those memories?" Charlie searched her thoughts for anything that could confirm the memories she clung to. "Look down," Elizabeth whispered. "What?" Charlie whimpered. "Your memory, I'm sure it's crystal clear since you were there and all." Elizabeth smiled. "Look down." Charlie returned to her memory, standing in front of her father's workbench. She was immobile. She didn't have a voice. "Look down," Elizabeth whispered again. Charlie looked to her feet, but she didn't see feet at all. Only 3 legs of a camera tripod anchored to the ground. He was making memories for you, making a life for his little rag doll, making her a real girl. Elizabeth explains that he made 4 versions of the Charlie being the 3rd, and Elizabeth being the 4th. She explains that something changed as Henry descended into madness, pouring his own grief and emotions into his creations. The 3rd Charlie was strange, and the 4th was not completed as it should be, fueled by anger and rage. The first thing he ever said to her was, "You were wrong." Elizabeth grabs Charlie by the chin, and the room begins spinning. Just as she loses consciousness, Elizabeth holds up a rag doll, Ella, and says, "This is you." Carlton hears a whimpering coming from an open door and walks in, finding the little boy whimpering in the corner, a large furnace and the twisted melted animatronic sitting on the table. William Afton walks into the room and explains that heat is the key. Carlton hears Michael's voice say his name, and he realizes now what the creature is. Carlton climbs up behind William to try and hit him with a metal bar, but he is grabbed by 2 metal arms on each of his arms. He hasn't tried this on a person before, and extracts something from the machine, stabbing a syringe into Carlton's heart. Maybe the heart was too direct, William says, as blood pours out of Carlton's mouth. Trial and error. Unlike you, the other Charlie added, unseen. I was real. I was an actual little girl, one who deserved the kind of attention showered over you. You were nothing. Carlton wakes up, disoriented, underneath a table at Freddy's. In front of him is Michael, drawing a picture. He explains that he needs to put the pictures back together as they had been torn apart. Michael tells him that the rabbit is their friend. As Carlton crawls out from under the table, he sees children, duplicates of the same children, all running around and scrambling for papers. He also sees Afton standing in the room. A single figure stood out amongst the chaos, out of phase with the surroundings. At first it seemed to be a man bent over a table, but as Carlton's head throbbed with waves of confusion, the man became a yellow rabbit, not standing over a table, but over 5 children, tied together as one. Carlton says aloud this isn't real, confused in overlapping realities. He asks another child who the rabbit is, and she also says that he is their friend. He realizes they don't know the truth, and begins grabbing the papers too, helping to put them back together. Charlie crawls into the study and manages to find a paperweight, smashing it in Elizabeth's face, which damages her. She manages to get into a closet, and as she turns around, she sees the machine that killed her father, still holding a knife. Elizabeth turns the closet door, and as Charlie hears John cough, she knows he will survive and finds relief in that. You're right, Elizabeth, Charlie said. Elizabeth's smile faded. I was never supposed to be here. Neither of us were. Charlie grips the ragdoll close to her chest. Elizabeth frowned in confusion, then peered over Charlie's shoulder, seeing the robot standing directly behind her. Charlie flinched her other hand, which was behind her back, doing something unseen with a quick motion. A metal pulley screamed. Charlie closed her eyes, hugging the doll, and when the knife went through them, it did not hurt. Elizabeth gasped as the blade plunged through her too, sounding almost human. Charlie stabs the knife through herself, the doll, and Elizabeth, killing all of them. As Carlton puts the drawings back together with the children, it causes the duplicate children to form together as their drawings are put back together. They also become more coherent. One of the girls introduces herself as Susie, another as Cassidy, and a boy introduces himself as Fritz. Carlton struggles to introduce himself. William Afton feels he's running out of time and plans to attack the blonde boy, Jacob. He thinks the machine needs new life. The animatronics head towards him, Funtime Freddy and Mangle. He asks Mangle to bring the boy to him. Susie says that she has to do something for the rabbit to help him. He asked me to do something for him just now. He wants to bring a new friend for us and he needs my help. Carlton tries to stop her, but she's insistent. John wakes up and discovers the bodies in the closet. He throws up and can't look again, leaving the house without looking back. Carlton is sitting with the children as Afton tries to put the boy on the table. A slew of many animatronics crawl into the room, but this doesn't stop him on his mission. Carlton tries to explain to the children that he is the bad man. He is the one who hurt them and not their friend. He draws on the drawing of the 5 children and the rabbit to show them what really happened, just like in the FNAF movie. The children huddled close. The yellow rabbit's eyes were now dark red, and blood dripped from its mouth. The children looked confusedly at Carlton, but there was a spark of recognition in their faces. I'm sorry, Carlton said desperately. This is the bad man. This is the bad man. Carlton pointed from the drawing to William Afton and back again. He is the bad man who hurt you, and right now he's about to hurt someone else, Carlton pleaded. The animatronics all head towards Afton, trying to attack him. As they bite him and he is bleeding, he still tries to head towards the boy, who's now jumped off the table and gone back to the corner. As he reaches for him, the mass of a figure on the table, burning hot, grabs William Afton, setting him alight. Carlton wakes up on the floor, now back to his real body. He wakes up to Michael sitting on the floor next to him, as the other 4 children walk away. He waits to hear that the boy is okay, and places his drawing over Carlton's wound. He disappears as his voice echoes, "Thank you." Carlton hears the voices of John, Marla, and Jessica outside, coming to get him. Carlton wakes up in the hospital bed with his father, Jessica, John, and Marla around him. Marla presses him, asking him what happens as he confirms that all the children are okay. Carlton asks if Charlie is okay, and Clay says he is looking for her. John says that he won't find her. Jessica gives Carlton something she found beside him. He unfolded it, revealing a grassy hill with 5 children running over it, the sun overhead. John walks somberly to the cemetery, remembering his response when Charlie remembered he'd said he loved her in regret. A woman beneath a tree reaches her hand out to him, and he walks with her. He looks at two tombstones. One is Henry's, and the other reads Beloved Daughter, Charlotte Emily, 1980 to 1983. So that's it. Everything that happens within the Silver Eyes Trilogy. It's been stated that the timelines in the book are not exactly the same as that of the games, but share the same characters, universe, and some of the same storylines. I personally really enjoyed this trilogy, even more so than the FNAF short stories, as it built a story and characters develop over time. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. Bye.